I'm Morgan Pehme, Editor-in-Chief of City and State, and this is Last Look. Today we're on location from the New York State Conservative Party headquarters in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, with Chairman Mike Long. Mr. Long, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here.
What are your thoughts on the primary? Were you satisfied with the results?
I was from the outcome of Joe Lhota winning the Republican Party primary. You know, he has been endorsed by the Conservative Party. I think his candidacy is an important candidacy, and with his victory on the Republican line, I believe I know what the odds are. I know it's an uphill battle, but I believe that his candidacy is probably a very important time in history for New York City if we want to continue to move forward and not go backwards.
What do you think that Joe Lhota needs to do to overcome this, 40-point deficit right now in the polls?
Well, he's a little bit lower than Giuliani was and Bloomberg was at this stage of the game. They were a little bit higher. Number one, he has to raise money to be able to get his message out and to keep the campaign going. And I think he has to stay consistent about talking about what his vision is for the future, to build on the successes that we've had in the last 20 years. He's not another Mike Bloomberg. He's not another Rudy Giuliani. He's Joe Lhota. But I think he has to lay out what Joe Lhota, can do to continue to grow New York City and to create jobs, to improve our schools, and more importantly, one of the biggest battles are going to be to make sure the safety of the citizens of the city continues. And I think that's a stark difference between him and his opponent.
Do you have fears for the future were Bill de Blasio to be elected mayor?
Yeah, I think I have clearly de Blasio gets elected mayor. I'm really concerned about going back to the days of John Lindsay and going back to the days of David Dinkins. And they were not good times for New York City. New York has really moved forward with one of the finest cities in the world. And we want to continue to move that way so people can live here, work here, raise families here. And I think the only way to do that is through the election of Joe Lhota.
One of the ways that New York has changed, though, is it's become more liberal, at least in its political leanings. It's become increasingly more Democratic. I believe the city is about 2 or 3% more Democratic than when Rudy Giuliani won. And the Democrats there are fewer Reagan Democrats and more Democrats who identify themselves as progressive Democrats. Is that just an insurmountable hurdle for a Republican and a conservative candidate to overcome at this point?
It's not insurmountable, but it makes it harder, and there's no question about that. I'm not going to deny that. But we cannot have a divided city. We have to have a united city. It has to be one New York City. And that's what Joe Lhota represents. Bill de Blasio, sorry to say, represents two cities. And his campaign strategy of divide and conquer, of class warfare, anti-police policing in our city is not good for the future of the city of New York. So that's a decision the citizens are going to have to make, and they're going to have to live with that decision if they choose the wrong way. Joe has a tough race, but I think it's not insurmountable, and we can win this election.
Talking about unity, Chairman, in the past you've been criticized by some for not aligning your party precisely with the Republican Party, that sometimes you've picked other candidates and you've gone a different direction because of your principles. Do you think that in order for Republican conservative candidates to succeed, given the numerical odds, that you will have to more closely align with the Republican Party in the future?
I don't intend to change my beliefs or my principles. I don't think the party's intending to change their principles. But I think we did show that we can compromise, and I think we have in supporting Joe Lhota. We have differences, but I think it was important enough to make a decision about having a modified candidate that could build on successes and the changes that has taken place the last 20 years in the city of New York, not to allow the city to slip backwards to the days when there was lawlessness in the streets, I don't want to see the massive spending increases, which only leads to higher taxes on the backs of whether you're a liberal or conservative. Your taxes are going to go up if de Blasio wins. Your water bills are going to go up. Your rents are going to go up. It's going to be increased spending and taxes across the board. We don't need that.
Along with the mayoral race in November, we'll also be voting on the statewide gambling referendum. You issued a statement saying that you oppose voting for that referendum. What was your reasoning?
Well, the party is opposed to it. The state party is opposed to it. I'm personally opposed to it also. The reason is very simple. The voters are being asked to vote on allowing the governor to have 7 new casinos at some point in history in the future throughout the state of New York. Number one, they don't identify where these casinos are going to be. That's like buying a gift bag and you don't know what's in it. You don't know where it's going to be. It could be in your backyard. It could be in next door. That's number one. It's being supported and promoted under false pretenses. It's in the proposal itself. It says that property taxes are going to be lower and more money for education. You know, that there's no place in the bill does it say how they're going to lower property taxes if this passes. And if you believe that, yeah, I got a Brooklyn Bridge I'd like to sell you.
So you don't believe that it will be a source of new revenue for the state?
I think it'll be a source of new revenue for the elected officials to spend more. You know, the lottery was supposed to save us money and go directly to our schools, and it was going to help save the budgets of education across the state from going up. Needless to say, what has happened, every year school budgets go up, and the lottery hasn't done that. Casino gambling's not going to do it. And as a matter of fact, it's going to cause more problems. Wherever there are casinos, there are problems. Family problems, gambling problems. It costs, socially, it will cost government more.
So is it fundamentally a moral objection to you that you have to it? I mean, if the governor had said precisely where he was going to put the 7 casinos, if he said that, you know, let's say that New York City would be on the table, would there be any grounds where you would look at the referendum differently?
I think it's kind of sad when government starts dependent on raising funds through gambling. I think that's a rather sad way to finance a society. The way to finance a society is to create real private sector jobs. The way to finance society is to remove the restrictions to allow upstate New York to build. And fracking is a clear example. Every place there's fracking across the nation, the states are thriving, they're gaining revenue, they're raising good revenues to run government. Not here in New York. They don't allow those kind of things, but they want to think they're going to balance the budget on the backs of having people spend their hard-earned money in casinos. And in most cases, most of the people that go to casinos are not people that can afford to be in casinos.
What is the Conservative Party going to do to oppose the referendum? I mean, you issued this statement, but are you going to be actively engaged in trying to convince voters not to vote?
We're going to do everything we can from the grassroots up to try to convince people to vote no on the casino gambling amendment. We've put out a mail-in to all our grassroots supporters up and down the state of New York. We have asked all our leaders to mount campaigns in their local communities, and we're going to continue to intensify that all the way through election.
Looking ahead to 2014, what are your legislative and your electoral priorities?
Certainly, I'd like to get New York, and especially upstate New York, to grow again. You know, we are losing, and more citizens are moving out of upstate New York than we can afford to lose. And we have to stop the bleeding. And the only way to do that is we have to really create jobs upstate New York. And one way to do that is to lift the mandates off the counties, lift the restrictions off businesses, let New York be a friendly place to start a business. come here to work, build, and live, and have a family stay here.
Have you seen any candidates that you feel are promising to take on any of the three statewide Democratic officials?
That has been a problem, and right now, naturally, we are looking at that. We have to get moving on that right after the mayor's race. I would like to be able to sit here and tell you that I have a closet full of candidates ready to jump out for statewide races. That's not the fact yet, but we will have candidates, and we will do the best we can to be competitive. I think Governor Cuomo has, in his first year in office, took the right direction, started to move in the right direction. I even said, you can Google it and find it, I said positive things about him, but certainly he has now gone back to his roots, which is his progressive, liberal roots, believing that government can do it all and not the private sector.
Chairman, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Good to be with you.
And that's it for this episode of Last Look. For more episodes, please visit us on the web at cityandstateny.com.